Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all in Warsaw. The last months has fundamentally changed the European security environment. February 24th became a reminder for us that horrors of a full-scale war in Europe do not necessarily belong to the past. Undoubtedly, this brings many questions on how to enhance our common security. I truly believe that here in Warsaw, we have a great venue to discuss and share our perspectives on those issues, and that the outcome will serve us as solid ground on how to effectively face Russian aggressive neo-imperialism and the multidimensional consequences of this war. As a result of Russia's brutal invasion in Ukraine, we face a security crisis. We have hoped we would never face again a full-scale armed conflict in Europe. Russia's aggression has proven Moscow's neo-imperial ambitions into general disregard for the European security architecture and rules-based international order, as well as readiness to use military force against its neighbors. There are no doubts that the attack has been planned from the very beginning of the Russian military buildup. Before the invasion, Moscow had cynically played for time, continuing its apparent engagement with the West. All that to complete the necessary military preparations with no goodwill to find a diplomatic solution. These lessons should be considered while reassessing further approaches to Russia. From the very beginning of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, the Belarusian regime has sided with Moscow, directly supporting the aggression. Therefore, just as Russia, Belarus should face the same level of our pressure on them. Poland is committed to the 360-degree approach. Therefore, we continue participation in efforts aimed at tackling challenges related to NATO's southern flank and the EU's southern neighborhood. They are usually associated with countering and preventing terrorism and illegal migration, as well as stabilization of the region. But one should admit that Russia's footprint on the 360-degree approach is growing. Moscow strives to influence the security situation from the Arctic through Eastern Europe, the Black Sea region, the South Caucasus, to the Middle East and North Africa, not only by military, but also hybrid instruments, including the Belarusian hybrid attack on Poland and Baltic states, orchestrated by Moscow as a prelude to the aggression in Ukraine. In fact, it continues to this day. We still face the migration pressure on our Belarusian border, similarly to the countries that have recently been impacted again by the migration through the Balkans route. Currently, Ukraine remains the main objective of Russia's aggressive policy, but the threat it poses has been observed for many years. Let me remind you what the late President of Poland, Lech Kaczyński, said in Tbilisi during the Russian invasion in 2008. Today, Georgia, tomorrow, Ukraine, the day after, the Baltic states, and later, perhaps also my country, can become the objective of Russia's attack. I admit that we hear more and more frequently reflections that the assessment of Russia and Belarus formulated by Poland and many like-minded allies in our region a long time ago is realistic. I hope that today allies and partners will consider the assessment regarding ensuring our and Ukraine's security. No country can fully address the entire spectrum of threats and challenges alone. Therefore, the entire Euro-Atlantic community must take a proactive stance to counter Russia's efforts to undermine the rules-based international order and to threaten our security. that highlights the importance of an effective deterrence and defense strategy. Therefore, we welcome NATO Madrid Summit decisions, enhancement of NATO's battle groups on the eastern flank, scalable to the brigade level. Also, significant extension of NATO force structure, including through gradual increase of the high readiness forces, coupled by decisions on prepositioned equipment and stockpiles of military supplies, as well as robust NATO command and control arrangements. It demonstrates the unified perception of all allies on the need of long-term NATO adaptation and an increase of Allied presence on NATO's eastern flank. The adaptation, which should transform NATO assurances from forward presence endorsed during NATO Warsaw Summit in 2016 to forward defense, able to ensure the deterrence by the nail of every inch of NATO's territory. There is no alternative to such approach. We cannot afford the risk of regaining territories which potentially would be occupied by Russia. Also, taking into account atrocities and war crimes committed by its army in Ukraine, nor can we afford the devastation that is always the price of pushing Russia back. We welcome President Biden's strong message in Warsaw and Madrid on keeping or further enhancing US engagement in deterrence and defense against Russia. Now it is time to implement it on the ground. The US leadership is of paramount importance in this process. NATO is essential to provide deterrence for those who are particularly engaged in support for Ukraine and are most exposed by its geography or commitment to the Russian and Belarusian threat. It is the most important mission of the alliance in the framework of the common effort to support Ukraine's self-defense. But it will be essential also in the future, after this war ends. It seems unlikely that Russia will reevaluate its anti-Western paradigm as well as its attitude towards the current international order. Planning the defense of the eastern flank, we cannot underestimate Russian military potential, even if it will be weakened by the current campaign. Mistakes made by the Kremlin in the planning and decision-making process before the invasion prove that Russia has a problem with the self-awareness of its own weaknesses. The risk of inaccurate assessment of its military might versus NATO allies is growing and may potentially lead to the decision of a military attack in the future. We also welcome the US readiness to support Europe in diversifying energy supplies, also declared by President Biden in Warsaw. It is crucial to tackle the problem of growing energy prices, which requires the synergy of EU and US efforts in this regard. The availability of larger volumes to be supplied is of crucial importance for Europe, including our region. Damage to European economies related, inter alia, to the situation around East-West energy resources transit routes proves that there is an urgent need to increase our resilience in this area. Abandonment of Russian energy supplies should be of permanent character to avoid dependence. Until Russia is ready to accept a political solution of this conflict, guaranteeing the long-lasting security of Ukraine, there is a need to continue sufficient, comprehensive support to Ukrainians. We need to remember that they are paying the highest price fighting for their and our freedom. What Kiev can achieve at the negotiating table is very closely linked to the situation on the battlefield. We are committed to ensure that the Ukrainian position during negotiations will be as strong as possible. To stop the onslaught, it is of crucial importance to enable Ukraine to push Russians back from captured territories. To make that gain, we should maximize a comprehensive pressure on Russia to limit its capacity for action and finish the conflict as soon as possible. The EU, together with NATO, should find synergetic efforts to improve infrastructure that will expand access of our region to crude oil and fuel from other directions. It is of crucial importance to ensure that we are united and at the same time effective in this effort. We welcome the unprecedented Euro-Atlantic unity that has been built after February 24th. We need to keep this unity, remembering, though, that is valuable only when underpinned by effectiveness. Our support must be decisive, ensuring that we are not only able to contain Russia, but also create conditions to empower Ukraine to defend itself, which will get us as soon as possible to the ending phase of this war. Instead, the Kremlin has de facto announced its readiness for further escalation. Kremlin's recent activities, especially Putin's irresponsible nuclear rhetoric, the announced mobilization and sham referendums leading to the annexation of Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine, are deeply concerning. It is also a signal that the Kremlin is still not ready for a political solution. And it will not be ready until Russian leadership understands that aggressive policy is counterproductive. Instead of abandoning Ukraine, as Moscow expected, we continue to provide Ukraine with further multidimensional support, including military assistance. We have also opened the door to Europe for Ukraine. Instead of weakening NATO, allies keep united, strong, and ready for defense and deterrence. Also open for new members if they apply to join, as it has happened in the case of Sweden and Finland. In such circumstances, there is a need to deepen the comprehensive pressure on Russia to revert its strategy, including through political, economic, and technological isolation, including maximized sanctions policy, imposed not only by Euro-Atlantic community, but all like-minded partners across the globe. We need to convince a broader spectrum of countries that still keep their relations with Russia, that Moscow's irresponsible behavior is not in their interest. Sanctions must not only be extended, but also sealed. There is also a need to reinforce the message directed to the Russian society to stop this brutal aggression. At the same time, there is a need to continue the military support related to the supplying Ukrainian armed forces with armaments, munitions, equipment servicing, and trainings. Especially facing the Russian mobilization, it is of utmost importance to keep the appropriate potential of defenders. We are also committed to ensure the humanitarian support for Ukraine, including hosting refugees. Poland is in a leading group of those undertaking such efforts, using all opportunities, including donations as well as expanding production capacities of defense industry. Our support in relation to the GDP is remarkable. We also actively encourage other countries to enhance their support. We remain committed to stay on this course. There is a need for synergetic efforts on both sides of the Atlantic in this regard, including coordination between EU and NATO countries. The establishment of the Ukrainian Defense Consultative Group during the April meeting in Ramstein allowed like-minded countries to better coordinate support in the long term. The solidarity realized by financial contributions is also valuable, especially if donated by countries which, for some reasons, are not able to participate otherwise. Even though we cannot always assess that those reasons are justifiable. It can contribute to the backfilling, which might be essential for further donations or investments to increase the production capacity of decisive armaments and munitions. Through this effort, we can simultaneously reach the goal of increasing the security of the Euro-Atlantic community, investing more the defense industry, which also maintains our defense capabilities. Ukraine must win this war, and after that, it should win the post-conflict period when the Russian aggressiveness will continue to destabilize Ukraine and the wider region at the least. Rebuilding Ukraine after the conflict will also require our commitment. It must be undertaken simultaneously with the process of accession of Ukraine to the European Union. There is also a need to keep NATO's door open for new members with no exclusions, including Ukraine. The comprehensive integration of Ukraine with the European and Euro-Atlantic community will be the best investment for the stability and prosperity of all of us. The broad spectrum of threats and challenges, especially the need to increase the defense of our own territory, is the new security reality in Europe. It requires a comprehensive response. Therefore, Poland continues to invest in armed forces capabilities. It is critical not only to our security, but also remains a contribution to the security of the entire region and overall NATO defense and deterrence posture. It is a very limited time frame. We must rapidly extend armed forces quality and quantity, with a purpose to ensure greater and more powerful defense capabilities. This policy has unanimous support in Poland. It is underpinned by the Bill of Homeland Defense adopted in March of this year, supported by all parliamentary parties. The bill allows us to release additional significant funds for both purchasing new equipment and increasing the number of troops. Defense expenses of Poland will reach 2.2% of GDP this year and will reach the level of at least 3% from 2023 on. First and foremost, we have accelerated the process of modernization of the Polish armed forces. This means faster development of key capabilities, taking into account inter alia observations from the Russia-Ukraine conflict. In the course of armaments procurement, we strive to ensure the participation of the Polish defense industry if deliveries can be offered in a reasonable time frame. As much as possible in these demanding circumstances, we are working on long-term industrial and political military partnerships. Inviting partners that will be able to support the development of the Polish defense industry. To make that gain, we ensure in contracts the transfer of technologies, transfer of production, or adaptation of Polish platforms and components. Simultaneously, the modernization, we plan to increase the number of armed forces active duty military personnel. To make those gains, there have been introduced various types of military service on a voluntary basis, as well as improvements of the recruitment system. Once all of the above-mentioned undertakings will be implemented, Poland will have even more capacities to decisively contribute to regional security and stability, extending its share in overall NATO effort. Recent months have fundamentally changed Euro-Atlantic security. Russian aggression on sovereign Ukraine has brought back memories of the darkest times in our history when totalitarian regimes unilaterally decided about the future of states and the free nations. The priority of our defense policy remains efforts undertaken to increase the security of Poland in the broader context of ensuring the security of NATO's eastern flank and the EU's eastern frontier. The aim is to ensure a credible deterrence and defense, coherent with the collective defense principle, however, based on effective national capabilities provided by the Polish armed forces. At the same time, we are committed to support our Ukrainian neighbors in defending their sovereignty threatened by the Russian aggression and hostilities. Ukrainian soldiers, as well as civilians, are paying the highest price for the security of Europe as a whole and deserve all our support. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you fruitful debates at the Warsaw Security Forum. Thank you very much.